Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to replace the user control panel in a GE dishwasher. I'll post the model number of this dishwasher in the video description. But the reason I'm doing this is that the dishwasher has become totally unresponsive. When you open the door, the user interface should illuminate and you should be able to select the cycle using the buttons on the top edge. Unfortunately, in my case, none of that works. This started a couple months ago with the dishwasher just acting up. Typically, when you open the door like that and the interface comes on, you'll hear a series of beeps. Well, this started with the dishwasher just beeping on its own when it was not being opened. There was no one around it. It would just be, it wouldn't be running. It would just be sitting still, no one touching it, and you'd hear it beep like the door had been opened. And that went on for several months probably. And then eventually it became totally unresponsive like this. So I tried turning the breaker off and back on after a few minutes, and that cleared it up for a short period. The weird intermittent beeping continued though. And we've had probably 2 or 3 complete failures like this at this point. And until now, resetting or turning the power off and then re-energizing the dishwasher would solve the problem. But now that's no longer the case. I've tried killing power to it and leaving it off for even a whole day, and it just no longer works. So I've already done some troubleshooting to determine that the issue is the user control interface board. I'll post a link to the troubleshooting video that I made. So anyway, let's just go ahead and get started here. Again, we are replacing the board here at the top edge of the door. Unfortunately, it's not easy to get to. We're going to have to remove the entire door from the dishwasher, which is going to mean slightly removing the dishwasher from the opening in the cabinets. I'm going to find out if I have enough slack in the power and water supply and drain hose to not have to disconnect everything, but it's possible that that I may have to completely unhook all the connections underneath in order to have the slack that I need to slide this forward so we can remove the door. Anyway, first things first, make sure you turn the power off. I've already done so. My breaker is off in the panel, and we can go ahead and get started. So the first thing we need to do is remove the toe kick underneath here. If you've watched the troubleshooting video, then you know this is a 1/4 inch nut driver. 1 screw there, and 1 screw there. So I'm going to remove those to expose the underside of the dishwasher, and we'll move on. Okay, you can see I've removed the toe kick cover panel that exposed the insulation. So next we just want to remove that gently and pull that out of our way. Okay, with the insulation removed, I can now get a good look at everything underneath here. As I mentioned before, there are 3 connections underneath the dishwasher: the water supply, the drain hose, and the electrical connection. And we need to ensure that we have slack in all of those in order to pull the dishwasher out maybe 6 to 8 inches from the cabinet, in order to disconnect the cords that attach to each hinge on the door, because we're going to have to completely remove the door from the dishwasher itself. In my case, it looks like I got lucky and I think I have enough slack in everything. You can see here the water connection, the water supply line. If you need to disconnect any of these, in your case, you're going to want to, if you need to disconnect the water line, you're going to need to turn the water off wherever the dishwasher is fed from. Typically it's fed from a angle stop valve underneath your kitchen sink. So you would turn that valve off, and then you can unthread whatever coupling you have here. I would recommend having some sort of a small saucer or towel or something under here, because there's definitely going to be water trapped in this line when you disconnect it that will drain out. So you would, if you need to, you would unscrew this counterclockwise. The drain hose you can see here runs around and connects to the drain pump right here. In my case, it's held on by a band clamp that can be loosened using a hex driver. I'm not sure if this is a 1/4 inch or it looks like probably 5/16. So I would need to loosen that and pull that rubber connector off the pump itself. Thankfully, it looks like I don't need to. But if you find yourself not having enough slack in that hose, that's how you would disconnect it. Again, I would recommend having something to clean up whatever water may be trapped in that hose, because you can see it's higher here than it is down there, so there's almost certainly some water in there and potentially some debris from the dishwasher that could be kind of nasty. So just be prepared that that's going to want to drain out from you if you disconnect that hose. And then of course the third connection is electrical. If you watch the troubleshooting video, you'll know that this is the electrical junction box. It's held in place by a 5/16 screw here, which I will quickly remove so that you can get a look inside. So I've got a 5/16 screwdriver. Once that screw is out of the way, we can carefully remove the box cover. You can see it's slotted here, just fit around this connector there. You should have 3 connectors in here with wire nuts. You'll have, well, you should have a black hot wire like this, a white neutral wire here, and a green ground. That's not to say all wiring is always done correctly, but your dishwasher harness that comes off of this connector here will have a black, white, and a green, like that. So just make sure that you note whatever color wiring you have coming from your feed under the dishwasher through the back of the junction box. Make sure you note what color matches up with the 3 wires coming from the harness. Again, they should be black, white, and green to match, but sometimes that's not the case, so take good notes before you disconnect anything here. Once you get the wire nuts off, if you need to disconnect this, there's a locking ring here that you can unscrew counterclockwise. You can see mine was a little bit loose already, so I'm glad I opened this up. I'm gonna retighten that before I button everything back up. All right, so that tells you how you can disconnect everything if you need to. I'm gonna move forward without undoing any of that because I think I have enough slack. So let me reposition here. We'll make the next step. Okay, so now we need to open the dishwasher, and you should have 2 brackets holding the dishwasher to the underside of your countertop like this. And typically they'll just have 1 screw in there. In my case it's a Phillips, so we need to remove both of those. Careful that you don't lose the screw, and that should allow us to slide the dishwasher forward. Again, you need to make sure you have enough slack in all the connections underneath before you try to pull this out. But once you're sure that you've got the slack or you've disconnected anything that's not long enough, then you can slide the dishwasher out, which I will do next. Okay, you can see I removed the screws holding the dishwasher to the underside of the countertop. So now we can shut the door, make sure it latches, and then gently, using 2 hands, pry on the outer corners of the door, and that should help the whole dishwasher slide forward. And again, we're looking to get it maybe 6 or 8 inches out so that we can access the hinges. I'm going to slide this out now and show you what to do next. Okay, I started pulling from underneath the door like I just said, but that felt a little bit flimsy. So once I got the dishwasher out, maybe 1 inch or 2, there's a flange right here. You can get your fingers behind on both sides and pull. That's a much better way to slide it forward. So I'm going to finish pulling this forward and then we'll move on. Okay, you can see I've slid the dishwasher out enough to expose the hinge here, and we need to remove this tension cable from the hinge, and we should be able to lift that plastic connector up over the metal hook right there. So I'm just going to grasp it with some pliers, gently lift and release the tension. And I need to do the same thing on the other side. I'm not really going to be able to show that in my case because it's so close to my cabinet, but I've got just enough room to reach in there and do the same thing there. And then we'll move on. Okay, so now we need to get back underneath the dishwasher and disconnect the wiring harness for the door from the dishwasher itself. So you can see the harness here coming from the back side of the door. And if you follow it, it terminates at a little connector here. And if you watch the troubleshooting video, this just has a little squeeze tab here. You can squeeze with your thumb and then gently pull down. So, like that. Sorry, the camera wasn't really focused, but hopefully you saw that. And now we need to make sure that we remove the harness from this little plastic wire connector or wire retainer so that we can pull the door off and separate it from the dishwasher. So just pop the harness up out of that little plastic retainer there, like that. And now the door should be ready to come off. Okay, we are now ready to remove the door from the dishwasher. To do that, we're going to want to open it just slightly and just enough to get your hands in here and grasp either side. There's a good place to catch your thumb right there on both sides, and keep the door almost closed. And we're going to want to lift straight up with both hands, and it should slide the hinges out. You can see, well, hard to really show, but that's the general idea. You can see when I lift, it's going to want to come. I'm just going to pull straight up like that. So I'm going to remove this, and then I'm going to lay it down on a towel so I don't scratch up the front of the door, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, you can see I've gotten the door removed. It did take a little bit of finagling to get both the hinges to clear the main frame of the dishwasher, but I got it removed without too much difficulty. And you can see I've laid it on some towels to protect the front of the door. The next step is to remove a 1/4-inch screw from the bottom of each hinge using a 1/4-inch nut driver, like so. All right, got those removed. Let me reposition, we'll move to the next step. Okay, the next step is, well, here's the screw that we just removed. If you look back here, there's another 1/4-inch screw on the hinge on both sides. So we need to remove those, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, you can see I've removed the two 1/4-inch hex screws from the bottom of the outer panel. Now we need to remove another series of 1/4-inch screws from the top of the hinge. There's one here on this side, one on that side. Once we've removed those, then there are 4 Torx T25 screws on the side, just above the hinges. So 2 here and 2 on that side. Once we removed all of that, then we will be ready to remove the inner door panel from the outer door panel. So I'm going to remove all 6 of those screws and then reposition. Alright, I've removed all of those screws at the bottom of the inner door panel. You can see I've positioned the door upright. It's leaning on its hinges. If you do this, just be careful that you are ready to catch it in case it tips over, but I found that it's easier to separate this way. So basically the inner door panel, this is now completely separate from the outer door panel. And by lifting, let's see if I can film myself doing this, by lifting with my fingers under here, straight up, I should be able to separate it. Tell you what, I'm going to need 2 hands. Let me get it separated, and before I pull it apart, I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so I've gotten the inner and outer door panel separated. If you have someone to help you, it would probably be best to have them hold down on the handle while you grab the inner door panel with both hands and lift straight up. But you can see I've gotten them separated now, and this should pull apart. There you go. So now we've got access to the user control interface and housing right here. So I'm going to reposition and lay this down flat, and we'll proceed. Okay, as you can see, I've got the inner door panel laid flat, and the first thing we need to do is disconnect the 2 wiring connections to the user interface. You can see there's one here and one here. So this one, you squeeze top and bottom like so, and just gently lay that off to the side. This one looks like you squeeze left and right and pull it back. And now there's a series of 4 1/4-inch hex screws holding the housing for the interface in place. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 is tucked back here. So I'm going to remove those, and then we should be able to get the housing out of here and get access to the actual control board. Okay, I just realized that I pointed to the wrong screw in the last clip. The 4th one that I showed, it's not down here. I think I pointed to that one. It's here. Okay, so I've gotten everything loosened. As you can see, the 2 outer screws are much shorter. These 2 are longer, so just remember that when you go to put everything back together. Should be explanatory, self-explanatory, because you can see that these have to reach much farther to grab, but I just wanted to make note of that. So I'm going to pull these out and we'll remove the housing next. Okay, with all the screws out of the way, we should be able to remove the housing for the user interface like so. And next we need to remove this light bezel here, this clear plastic piece. I'm going to see if I can find a small flathead screwdriver or something I can use to pop that off with. Okay, I moved over to a better work surface where I can carefully work on getting the bezel removed. You can see there are a series of little clips here on the bezel that hook into the housing. I started with a tiny flathead screwdriver at the corner and got that started in between the bezel and the housing, and then had a slightly larger flathead screwdriver, worked it in there and just twisted and gently went like that as I worked my way down. I've gotten the first 2 clips popped loose, and it's getting easier now as I go. So just be careful so you don't pop these clips off, because if the light bezel won't properly connect, it's going to be loose when you put everything back together. So I'm going to finish popping the bezel off, and that'll give us access to the old user interface board. We can get that removed from the housing. Alright, you can see I've gotten the light bezel removed, and now we can flip the housing back over, and if we push gently on the connectors, we should be able to separate the housing from the old control board itself. And there we go. So we've gotten the old one out. Now we're ready to put the new one in. But before we do that, we've got to pay special attention to the instructions that come with it. So here's my new part. Here's the box it came in. Here's the control board. And you'll note it looks mostly similar, but slightly different. Particularly right here, where there's a series of jumper pins. And if you read the instructions that come with the replacement part, we need to figure out what jumper configuration we need to fit our specific model. So this board looks like it's made to replace the board in multiple different dishwasher models. So you've got front control, profile front and top control, cafe, and then profile and monogram. In my case, I have a top control, as you noticed earlier. So they've highlighted these jumper pins, and that corresponds to, let's see, here we are. This is the new part here. So you can see 8421 right there above my finger. 8421. Now we need to flip over to the back, and we're going to need to find our specific model number. So bear with me, I'll show you where to find that inside the dishwasher, and then that'll tell you the jumper configuration that we need to set up before we install the new board. Alright, so inside the dishwasher itself, you will see a sticker, should be on the left-hand side, and it'll tell you the model number and serial number. So my model number starts with GDT 695. And if I look at instructions, came with the replacement part, come down here, GDT 695, and then that tells me the jumper configuration that I need to set up on the board. So now I know this is it, and we can go back to the work surface and get that configured, and we can install it. Okay, so we're ready to set up our jumpers. Again, this is the configuration that I need. So I need the jumper to touch both pins on the 8, the 2, and the 1 terminal, and to only touch the front terminal on the 4. Okay, the way it's shipped to me, I don't know if you can see here or not, but all of the jumpers are only installed on the rear terminal. And if you gently pull up, you can see I've already started removing the one on the 8. If you gently pull up, it should pull off. Let me set the phone down so I can do this with one hand. I don't want to damage the board. There we go. So that pulled straight off. Now I need to install it, reinstall it so that it fits over both pins. And push it down like that. See the difference? Okay, so I need to do that with the 8, the 2, and the 1, and then the 4 I need to move to the front pin. So that's only touching the front. So I'm going to configure those, and then we can put everything back together. Okay, I've finished configuring the jumpers, and you can see the setup exactly matches the diagram here for my model, GDT 695. Okay, so just make extra sure that you have your jumpers configured properly, or else this board is not going to work properly, and then you're going to have to take everything back apart and get these set up correctly. So pay close attention to this, make sure your model number matches the setup that you've got. Okay, so now we can go ahead and reinstall our new board in the housing. So we want to flip it over like that, and you gently drop it down in place like that. Okay, now we can set our light bezel back over the top. Make sure it lines up properly. And then we can just push it down. Make sure it clips in to all these clips. There's 4 on each side. Okay, once it's snapped into place, then we're ready to reinstall this in the inner panel. Okay, you can see I've gotten the light bezel reinstalled on the housing, and we're ready to reinstall the entire thing in the inner panel. So we need to slide it in position carefully and get the screw holes to line up. And then we can reinstall the 4 1/4-inch screws. Again, the 2 outer ones are short and the 2 inner ones are longer. So I'm going to reinstall those and then we'll move on. Okay, I've gotten the user interface housing reinstalled and we're ready to reconnect the wiring harnesses. So this one again fits in right here. Make sure it's aligned properly and then carefully snap it into place. Make sure it's secure. And then the other one here connects right there. Like so. There is a little retainer clip here. The wires hook underneath. So just make sure wires are in place like that. And now we should be ready to mate the inner panel to the outer panel again. So let me get that in position. Okay, so I've repositioned the outer door panel and inner door panel upright, and we're ready to mate them back together. Same way we took them apart, we're going to put them back together by lifting this up and dropping it down over this lip here on the outer panel. And we also need to get these clips, plastic clips on the inner panel to align with these slots on the outer panel, so they go in, and then as we drop down they'll hook on the back side. So I'm going to lift this up and get it aligned. Now I've got it hooked. I'm going to need 2 hands to reposition and lift up and kind of swing this in and get all these plastic clips to hook on the outer panel, but that's the general idea. So I'm going to do that next, and then we will work on reinstalling the screws at the bottom. Alright, I've gotten the inner and outer panels mated together. Everything's lined up, and you can see I've started the screws on both sides. Again, these are T25 Torx screws, so I'm going to tighten those, and then we're going to lay the door back down flat and work on these screws at the bottom. Okay, you can see I've laid the door flat, and we're ready to reinstall the hinges or the screws at the bottom on the hinges. Again, there's 1 1/4-inch screw up here that has coarse threads like that, and then there's another here with machine threads that goes there. And in hindsight, I don't think this actually needed to be removed because the hinge stayed connected to the outer panel the whole time. So I really think I just needed to remove these here. I didn't realize that at the time, but you can save yourself a step when you're doing this. You can learn from my mistake. Same thing on the other side. The machine thread screw goes here. The coarse thread screw goes up there. And once we've got those put back together, I'm going to give the door, the inside surface, a good wipe down, and then we will be ready to reinstall it on the dishwasher. We're getting close to being done. Okay, so I'm ready to reinstall the door now. We've got it in position. I don't really know the best way to describe this, but we've got to get the hinges on the door to fit outside the hinge receiver on the dishwasher itself. And then if you can see down right there where I'm pointing, there's a hinge pin that's going to sit down here in that slot on both sides.
it's greasy, so watch out for that. That could make a mess. But you need to get that peg, that hinge pin, aligned on both sides. So you need to lift the door with, by the handle, and maybe put one hand here. And it's going to have to go almost straight down. I'll see if I can get it started and show you. But you're just going to have to kind of fiddle with it till it seats itself in place. And then we can reconnect the tension cords at the bottom. Let me get it started, and I'll give you a look at what it looks like as it's going in. Be right back. Okay, that went pretty smoothly. Again, I made sure that the hinge bracket here on the door was outside that hinge bracket on the dishwasher itself, and I could kind of feel when that hinge pin sat into place in the bracket on both sides. I had the door at about that angle when I set it in place, and now it's fully seated. I can latch it, and then we can use our pliers to reinstall. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is just hook this and then pull the cord around the roller here. So you can see at the top right there inside there's a little plastic piece that'll hook over this like so, and then I can hopefully pull this cord. Let's see if I can do this with one hand down over the roller. Careful that you don't pitch yourself, but that worked pretty well. Now I've got to try to do the same thing on the other side where I don't have much clearance. I'm probably gonna use my pliers over here, but get both sides reconnected, and then we can hook things back up underneath, slide the dishwasher back in place, and we'll be done. Okay, I've gotten both hinge tension cables connected, so now we're ready to reconnect the wiring harness for the door. So if you recall, it plugs into this connector right here, and the squeeze tab, come on camera, focus for me. There we go. Hopefully you can see that squeeze tab points out, faces you. So it goes in like that, and you should hear it click into place like that. Make sure it's secure. And then if you remember from disassembly, there's this gray retainer clip right here. We want to make sure that our harness is tucked down into that so it doesn't get pinched in the door when you open it and shut it. There we go. All right. Now we need to push the dishwasher back into position so we can reinstall the screws that hold the upper portion, these brackets, to the underside of the countertop. So I'm going to slide everything back in, and we'll do that next. Okay, before I went any farther and pushed this back into place, I decided to re-energize the breaker and test the new part. And thankfully you can see that it is working. So our repair was successful. So I'm going to turn the breaker back off now and we'll finish up. But I just wanted to mention now is a good time to test things before you button everything back up. Alright, I've reinstalled the two Phillips screws that hold the upper brackets to the bottom of the countertop. So we can close up the door, and we're ready to put everything back together down on the bottom. If you had to disconnect your wiring, now's the time to reinstall it. Again, you would feed it through the hole in the back plate of the junction box, reinstall the locking ring, and tighten it by screwing it clockwise. Reconnect all your wire nuts, making sure you put the correct color wires back together as they were originally installed. And then you can reinstall the junction box cover, making sure you line up the notch here with the wire harness connector. There's also a tab right here that should hook into a slot right there. I don't know if you can see it, but right where my fingertip is, there's a slot that should hook into. It's kind of tricky depending on how much excess wire you have in there. It can be kind of tight, but I've kind of got it hooked. And then you reinstall the 5/16 screw there at the top of the junction box. I'm going to do that, and then we will move on. Okay, the junction box is closed back up. If you had to disconnect your water supply line or drain hose, now is the time to reinstall those. Again, your water connection is here. You tighten it by turning counterclockwise that way. Your drain hose, at least in my case, is secured with this band clamp. You might have a squeeze clamp, but either way, put that back on, tighten the connector, and then we are ready to reinstall the insulation under here and put the toe kick back on. I'm going to do that, and we will wrap this up. Okay, the insulation is tucked back into place, ready to put the toe kick in. I did forget to mention in the previous clip that if you did disconnect your water and or drain hose, you might want to start a quick cycle and then let the dishwasher fill and then cancel it and make it drain, and check underneath to make sure you don't have any leaks before you put this toe kick back on. Last thing you want to do is button everything up, start the dishwasher later, let it run, and realize that you're flooding your kitchen. In my case, since I didn't disconnect anything, I think I'm in good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and put the toe kick back on. You line up the slotted hole here with the screw hole in the dishwasher and reinstall the two 1/4 inch hex screws, and we can call this project finished. So I know this has probably been kind of a tedious video to watch. There's a fair amount of steps, but this is honestly, I think this is something that anybody could do with a little bit of patience and a little bit of confidence. So I hope this video will give that to you. If you have a similar issue with your dishwasher, this seems to be a super common problem with these GE dishwashers. I've read about this a lot when I was trying to diagnose the problem. Seems like a lot of people have the same issue, especially with the random beeps when the door's closed. That seems to be the first sign that your user interface board is going bad. So hopefully this will save you some money and some time and frustration if you're trying to do this project yourself. I think I spent maybe $100 on the control board when I ordered it online. It came in a genuine GE replacement part box, so it's not a knockoff. Not that the GE board may be great anyway, because I only got about 3 years out of this dishwasher before I had this problem. So anyway, that wraps this up. Again, I hope this has been helpful, and thanks for watching.